In 2015, a game developed by Turtle Rock Studios and published by 2K was released, delivering a new and unique gameplay experience. Many of you already know this game and may have been one of the first to play it, like I did, but for those of you who do not know, let me introduce you guys to Evolve. Now, after the massive success seen from the Left 4 Dead franchise, Turtle Rock and Valve agreed to divorce, where they took their talents elsewhere. The concept of the next project had begun prior to the development of Left 4 Dead. Inspired by the asymmetrical mode of Left 4 Dead and hunting games like Cabela's Big Game Hunter, the team wanted to create a game where the prey could strike back at the hunters. Publishers, including Valve, none of them were supportive of an idea of an asymmetrical multiplayer video game. Because at the time, it wasn't very much a big thing. So this was a pretty bold move. So Valve wasn't interested in the project no more. The companies thought that Turtle Rock was just too small to handle a AAA project. Publisher THQ decided to accept the game and take a risk on it and help with its funding. THQ's then president were very enthusiastic about the idea of having an asymmetrical multiplayer game like Evolve. THQ was one of my personal favorites growing up. THQ once hoped that Turtle Rock could develop a free-to-play business model for the game. However, this idea was later scrapped and resulted in some significant changes in terms of the game's gameplay and cast. On May 26, 2011, THQ announced that they would be publishing Turtle Rock's next major title. However, on June 10, 2011, THQ described Turtle Rock's next title as wild. At that time, THQ had already been in financial crisis that had begun way back in 2010 and declared bankruptcy on December 19, 2012. A company that goes by the name of Take-Two Interactive, which also owns the 2K series, paid $11 million to acquire the game and to secure the rights to the entire franchise. According to Turtle Rock themselves, they said they were super excited to work with Take-Two. The game was to be published under Take-Two's publishing label 2K Games and was introduced on January 7, 2014. During the game's development, the team size expanded to 75 staff members. Originally, the game was set to be released in October of 2014. However, 2K later delayed the release date to allow Turtle Rock to further polish the game. Evolve was released worldwide on February 10, 2015 for Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 4, and the Xbox platforms. While Evolve received generally positive reviews, the player base quickly dwindled. 2K would eventually shut down Evolve altogether in July 2023. Forever cementing its legacy as one of the games that had the greatest potentials and could have sought much more success in the long run, sequels, franchise, everything. Evolve had two main problems that I believe really held back the game and destroyed it in a lot of its own ways. Now, the first big problem was the lack of diversity and story. Now, this game is essentially one mode, Hunt. Even though the game offered various game modes like Nest, Rescue, Defend, and Arena, each with different objectives for both sides, the majority of the time people voted for Hunt, which got very repetitive and stale. In terms of a campaign mode, they gave us Evacuation mode in Evolve, which was basically a 5-match campaign where every round changed the next one. Like, for example, if the monster destroys something in one match, the next map might be filled with hazards, fire, gas, crazy weather, you name it. If the hunters won, they'd get bonuses too, like extra turrets or helpful drones. Or even some useless AI that kinda helps you, but truthfully doesn't really help you. It made the whole thing feel like a mini story where each win or loss actually meant something. By the time you hit the final match, it was a big do or die moment. It wasn't just like 5 random games. It felt like a mini war with consequences, and you were right in the middle of it until it ended. And you got the ending, and it's like, it left you with the frustrating feeling, and by the end of it, you were just right back at square one, playing Hunt all over again, basically. An even bigger problem with the game was the whole DLC situation, also known as death by pre-order. Now, before the game even came out, there was already over $130 worth of downloadable content announced. Skins, characters, monsters, everything under the sun, you name it. And people weren't very happy about this, of course. Like imagine buying a fully priced game, at that time only $60, and then being told, oh, by the way, here's a bunch of more stuff that you gotta pay extra. It made it feel like the game was being chopped up and sold in pieces before anyone even got to play it. That left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths that Evolve never truly recovered from. The whole thing felt very lazy, and it was simply an excuse for some of the investors to get the money back on the game, which of course we, the fans, paid the price for. Also, Evolve was very tedious and repetitive. Now, as much as I love the core idea of 4 hunters versus one monster, which was great, it didn't take long before people started saying it kind of felt the same, right? Sure, the roles were different and every match could be played out in its own way, but it quickly turned into a running simulator where all you were doing was chasing the monster. But if you weren't really into mastering classes or monsters, it could feel like you were doing the same thing over and over and over again. You know, you spawn, you drop, you start chasing the monster, and it's really cool the first couple of times, but over a while you realize that it's a lot of just kind of running around and simply chasing the other player, aka the monster. Now, if the monster reaches level 3 by basically eating the wildlife and growing and, like the title of the game suggests, evolving, you're screwed, you're cooked. By stage 3, the monster is strong enough and can easily overpower the team. So it can even destroy the power relay. However, you're cooked. You really do have to kill it before level 3, but things just don't always work out. Noobs, Rambos, all those COD tryhards, all of those people will easily doom your team. If somebody runs off, you get caught in a trap and you die. This game is very fleshed out. The world is actually very dangerous, and the game forces you to stick together, which was great. I don't knock you for that. If you had a bad tank / damage, you could not kill that monster. If you have a bad tracker, you couldn't find it to begin with, the team would be lost, and for some reason the monster would invade your trap, invade the dome when it shouldn't have been able to. If you have a bad medic, well, no one's getting heals, that's never fun. And if you have a bad support, well, you have a bad support, you have no support on your team. When Evolve launched in 2015, it was promising but flawed. But then came Stage 2, a full rework, a free-to-play relaunch, and a second chance at greatness. And for a moment, it actually felt like it was working. By mid-2016, Evolve's player base had dwindled dramatically. The combination of a rocky launch, negative pressure on the DLC, and gameplay imbalances had driven players away, including myself, to be honest. But Turtle Rock wasn't ready to give up. Evolve Stage 2 was their Hail Mary, a full overhaul of the game, with a fresh coat of paint and a new free-to-play model. The idea was simple: strip it down, speed it up, and make it more accessible to overall players in the community. And when it launched in July of 2016, the change was instant. Players' numbers surged, Steam charts jumped from a few hundred players to over 40,000 concurrent, and it felt like Evolve was back. The first thing returning players noticed was the pace. Stage 2 was faster, movement was quicker, cooldowns were reduced, and abilities were snappier. Everything felt tuned for chaos in the right way, much more sharper than what was there previously. Monsters felt more aggressive and had more tools to deal with the coordinated teams. Hunters were more agile with new mechanics like passive buffs and better mobility. The perks replaced the old progression system, letting you customize playstyles without grinding for hours. The UI and visuals got a refreshing look, making it feel sleeker and more modern. Matches didn't drag on anymore. You didn't spend 10 minutes tracking before a fight. Action kicked off much quicker, and even solo queue felt more forgiving. What Stage 2 got right was it was a free-to-play and it worked. It brought many new players into the new community, removed the biggest barrier and brought thousands back. The gameplay felt fresh. It was like Turtle Rock finally found the right speed for Evolve's unique formula, and the community vibes returned. For a few months, forums, streams, and matchmaking was truly alive again. New players were learning, veterans were teaching. I felt like the dream was finally happening. However, this was short-lived. Eventually, it came to a halt. Despite the promising revival, cracks began to show, and they began to show fast. There was no console support. Stage 2 never came to PS4 or Xbox One. That meant most of the player base never got to experience the rework. monetization was unclear. It was a free to play, but the game didn't clearly outline how it would make money in the long term. Cosmetics were there, but not enough to sustain the development. The communication also slowed. After a strong relaunch, updates became less frequent and went quiet. Matchmaking issues also returned as players dropped off again. Queue times grew longer, especially for certain roles. Then came the announcement. In October of 2016, just a few months after the relaunch, Turtle Rock revealed that they were no longer working on the game. They completely abandoned it. Evolve Stage 2 was being handed back to the publisher 2K, and development essentially stopped. The server stayed online for a while, but without updates, the player base faded again. Eventually, in 2018, Stage 2 was shut down. The game returned to its legacy version, which was the original launch version, and even that would later become inaccessible. Now, reflecting back on it, what could have been, playing Stage 2 felt like watching a game find itself again, only to be cut short before it could really grow. It fixed a lot of what was wrong with the original game, but it was far too late, with too little support left behind, and honestly, that's the part that hurts the most. For players who stuck around, Stage 2 was some of the best Evolve ever played. The game was faster, fairer, more fun, but without console support, ongoing development work, or a sustainable plan for the future, it simply couldn't last. There was no structure there. Now, after the spark of Stage 2 faded, there was one last thing. In 2018, 2K Games officially shut down Stage 2's dedicated servers. That meant that the free to play version was no longer available. The only version left was the Evolve Legacy, which was the original 2015 release version. But with peer to peer matchmaking and no ranked play, the experience felt gutted, bare bones. A game that once promised to redefine multiplayer was reduced to a shell of its former self, and then in September 2022, a strange flicker of hope appeared. A group of loyal fans noticed that peer to peer connections started working again, and even without support from 2K or Turtle Rock, a small community began quietly Evolve's legacy once more. Organizing matches through Discord servers and modding tools. For a while, the game had a heartbeat powered by entirely its most dedicated survivors. But there was no official comeback. Turtle Rock had completely abandoned it and long moved on. But there was no official comeback. Turtle Rock Studios had abandoned it and long moved on. They partnered with Warner Bros. To develop a Back for Blood spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead, but with no ties to Evolve. As of now, Evolve remains in limbo. Not fully dead, not fully alive, just in limbo. Paused. Hiatus. Looking back on it, Evolve had something special and it dared to be different. It had the bones of greatness, a fresh take on asymmetrical multiplayer, an immersive world with unique roles and dynamic battles, a very intriguing lore, the kind of game that, in the right hands, with the right support, could have built an esports scene with a long term player base and even a cinematic universe. But Evolve launched in an era of over monetization, unfinished games, and it got caught in the crossfire. If it had released today with better community support, seasonal updates, maybe a battle pass, and a free to play role model out of the gate, it could have thrived alongside titles like Dead by Daylight or Apex Legends or maybe even Marvel Rivals. Now, one final thought, a legacy worth remembering. In the end, Evolve is one of gaming's greatest what ifs. A bold idea that came too soon, stumbled out of the gate, and couldn't quite catch up, but that doesn't make it a failure. For the people who played it, who felt the rush of stalking their prey as a Goliath, or setting a coordinated perfect trap with your entire team, it was unforgettable. Now, I didn't really have these experiences as I did play solo. I had a blast playing it, and I really wish it would come back. I truly believe that in the future, Turtle Rock shouldn't abandon it and come back to it and maybe give it a second chance. Maybe call it Evolve 2 or something like that. Maybe something entirely different, for sure, with the campaign, more cooperative modes, maybe PvP mode with monster players. I mean, think about that, fighting a Goliath as Kraken or Behemoth versus Behemoth, or maybe even some sort of battle royale mode. I don't know, something, anything. I think A lot of things can be done here, and there's still a lot of things there in its foundation that it could make a great comeback. I mean, the sky's the limit. I really, really hope this franchise doesn't die and it can come back and become big and become what it was always meant to be. I hope it can evolve. That's what great games do, right? Even the ones that don't make it.